You know what the funniest thing about legends is? They always start with someone saying, "Oh, that could never happen." Well, let me tell you something, friend. As someone who lived through what I'm about to tell you, I can promise you this. Sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor. My name is Krix, and I used to be a data analyst for the Vorthak Stellar Council. Used to be. Past tense. Because after what happened 3 cycles ago, well, let's just say my perspective on impossible got a rather violent adjustment. It all started during one of our routine council meetings on Nexus Station. Picture this, a massive orbital platform floating in the void between 3 star systems home to representatives from 47 different species. We thought we were so sophisticated, so advanced, so ready for anything the galaxy could throw at us. How wrong we were. The human myth again, really? That was Jorik, our chief military strategist, rolling all 4 of his eyes at once. His purple skin was already showing the stress patterns that meant he'd had enough of this conversation before it even started. X, we have been over this 1,000 times. They are stories. Children's tales. Scary bedtime stories to keep young ones from wandering too far into space. Bex, our head of cultural studies, was not backing down. Her tentacles were doing that nervous wiggling thing they always did when she was frustrated. The evidence keeps piling up, Jorik. Multiple civilizations, across different sectors, all with similar stories. Bipedal creatures, about 2 meters tall, primitive technology but somehow incredibly dangerous. They call them humans in almost every translation we have found. Oh yes, Jorik's voice dripped with sarcasm, because clearly when 47 different species evolve, they all independently decide to make up the exact same imaginary monster. That makes perfect sense. I was reviewing the data streams on my console, only half listening to their argument. We'd had this same debate at least 20 times over the past year. X would present her evidence about these mythical humans, Jorik would shoot it down with logic, and the rest of us would pretend to care while secretly planning our lunch orders. The consistency across cultures is remarkable, though, piped up Mira, our youngest council member. Her silver scales shimmered as she spoke, betraying her excitement. Every story mentions the same key details. They are incredibly resourceful. They never give up. And most importantly, they are supposedly capable of something called spite-driven engineering. Spite-driven what now? I looked up from my console. This was new. Mira's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm only a recent academy graduate could muster. According to the legends, humans can apparently build impossible solutions to problems when they are sufficiently angry or insulted. There are stories of them powering entire space stations on what their language roughly translates to, because screw you, that's why. The entire council chamber erupted in laughter. Even I couldn't help but chuckle. The idea was absurd. No species in the known galaxy operated on pure stubbornness as a power source. Right? Jorik wiped tears from his eyes, and I suppose they also eat spicy food for fun and keep carnivorous predators as pets? Actually, Bex consulted her notes with a straight face, yes, on both counts. The legends are quite specific about those details. The laughter died down to nervous chuckles. That was oddly specific. Look, I interrupted. This is all very entertaining, but we have actual work to do. The Krillian trade dispute isn't going to solve itself, and we still haven't figured out what's causing those sensor anomalies in the outer rim. What anomalies? Mira asked. I pulled up the data on the main display. For the past 3 months, our long-range sensors have been picking up something moving through the outer rim systems. It doesn't match any known ship signatures, but it's definitely artificial. Whatever it is, it's big, it's fast, and it's heading in our general direction. Pirates? Suggested Jorik. No, the energy signatures are all wrong. This thing is putting out more power than some of our capital ships, but it's moving like a scout vessel. It's fast, efficient, making course corrections that suggest active scanning. How fast? Bex leaned forward, her tentacles suddenly very still. I checked the calculations again. At current rate of approach, it should reach the edge of our sensor grid in about 6 hours. The room went quiet. In space, things moving toward you quickly were rarely bringing good news. Send out a standard greeting transmission, Jorik ordered. Universal peace codes, trade inquiries, the usual diplomatic package. Already tried that, I replied. No response. Whatever's out there either can't understand us, doesn't want to talk to us, or what? Or it already knows exactly what it's dealing with and doesn't feel the need to introduce itself. But that got everyone's attention. In galactic politics, confidence was usually earned through superior firepower. 6 hours later, we found out exactly what had been heading our way. Contact on scope. The sensor technician's voice cracked as she made the announcement. Single vessel, bearing 27 Mark IV, distance, oh, void take me, it's right on top of us. The main display flickered to life, showing the exterior view of Nexus Station. There, hanging in space about a kilometer off our port docking bay, was the ugliest spacecraft I'd ever seen in my life. What in the seven hells is that thing? Jorik stared at the screen in disbelief. The ship, if you could call it that, looked like someone had taken 3 different vessels, smashed them together with a hammer, then welded the pieces back together with whatever was handy. All plating was mismatched, weapons were bolted on in configurations that made no engineering sense, and the whole thing was covered in what appeared to be graffiti? Are those words painted on the hull? Mira squinted at the display. I enhanced the image. Sure enough, there were symbols painted along the ship's side in bright, aggressive colors. Our translation matrix is working on it, I said. Let's see, it says, ask me about my anger issues and, oh, that's not very polite, your mother was a vacuum cleaner. Who puts insults on their ship? Jorik asked. Before anyone could answer, our communication system crackled to life. The voice that came through was unlike anything we'd ever heard before. It was rough, confident, and carried an undertone of barely controlled amusement. Nexus Station, this is the independent vessel Lucky Strike, requesting permission to dock and possibly trade for supplies, food, and whatever passes for coffee in this sector of space. Also, we are looking for a good fight, a better story. And someone who can explain why our navigation computer keeps insisting this station doesn't exist. The entire council chamber fell silent. We all stared at each other with the same expression of dawning horror. Did that thing just say it's looking for a fight? Mira whispered. The voice continued, apparently not waiting for a response. We have been traveling for quite some time, and frankly, we are getting a bit stir-crazy. Nothing personal, but we heard there was some kind of galactic council out here, and we figured we'd stop by and see what all the fuss was about. Fair warning, though. We have been living on recycled air and protein paste for the past month, so we are not in the best of moods. Jorik found his voice first. Unknown vessel, please identify your species of origin and state your intentions. A pause. Then laughter. Deep, genuinely amused laughter that somehow managed to sound both friendly and terrifying at the same time. Species of origin? Well, that's a fun question. We call ourselves humans. As for our intentions, well, we are explorers, traders, problem solvers, and occasional troublemakers. We heard stories about this big galactic community out here, and we thought it was about time we introduced ourselves properly. Every blood type in my body turned to ice water. I looked around the chamber and saw my own horror reflected in 46 other faces. Did it just say? Bex's voice was barely a whisper. Humans, I finished for her. It said humans. The myths, Mira breathed. The stories. They are real. On the main display, the ugly ship that had somehow crossed impossible distances just to find us hung in space like a promise of chaos to come. Its mismatched weapons systems were not pointed at us, which was probably the only reason we weren't already dust, but somehow that felt more ominous than reassuring. Nexus Station, the voice came again, we are reading elevated stress levels from your station. Everything okay over there? You folks seem a bit tense. Jorik cleared his throat and managed to activate his communicator with only minor trembling. Unknown, I mean human vessel. Please maintain your current position while we prepare appropriate docking procedures. No problem, came the cheerful reply. Take your time. We will just sit here and admire the view. Nice station, by the way. Very circular. We like circles. Though, if you don't mind me saying, your defensive systems seem a bit outdated. That plasma array on Ring 7 has a pretty obvious blind spot. And your shield generators look like they are running about 30% below optimal efficiency. Might want to look into that. I felt my jaw drop. This human ship had been in our vicinity for less than 10 minutes and had already conducted a complete tactical analysis of our defenses. Worse, it was casually sharing that information with us, as if it were discussing the weather. How did it scan our systems so quickly? I whispered to Jorik. I don't know, he whispered back, but I'm really hoping it's friendly. Oh, dumb. The human voice continued conversationally, and just so you know, we picked up some interesting chatter on the long-range frequencies. Seems like you have got some kind of trade dispute brewing with someone called the Krillians. Nasty bunch, from what we have heard. Very fond of aggressive negotiation tactics. If you need any help with that situation, just let us know. We are pretty good at resolving disputes. The way it said resolving disputes made my skin crawl. Bex leaned over to me, her tentacles practically tied in knots with anxiety. Krix, she whispered, in all the stories, in all the legends from all the different species, what was the one thing they all agreed about humans? I thought back through all the data I'd dismissed as mythology. The consistent details across dozens of cultures. The warnings passed down through generations of spacefaring species. They never lie about being dangerous, I whispered back. On the screen, the ship called Lucky Strike hung motionless in the void, waiting patiently for our response. Its weapons systems remained powered but not targeted, its engines idled quietly, and somewhere inside its cobbled-together hull. The creatures from every species' darkest legends were probably having coffee and planning their next move. The universe's greatest joke had just come to call, and we were about to find out exactly what happened when myths decided to become reality. Well, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, this is either going to be the most interesting day of our careers or the last day of our careers. Jorik was frantically typing commands into his console, probably running threat assessments and evacuation protocols simultaneously. And Krix, what do we actually know about human combat capabilities? And please tell me it's all exaggerated folklore. I pulled up every file we had on human mythology. The data scrolled past faster than I could read it, but the key points were consistent across every culture we'd encountered. According to the stories, they are persistent, adaptable, and have a disturbing tendency to win fights they should lose by any mathematical calculation. How disturbing are we talking? Mira asked. Well, there's one story from the Zenthari archives about humans defeating a superior force by convincing their enemy's own weapons to work for them instead. Another from the Glixen records describes humans building a functional starship out of spare parts and pure determination after their original missile was destroyed. That's impossible, Jorik stated flatly. So were humans, until about 5 minutes ago. Our communication system crackled again. Nexus Station, this is Captain Emma Santos of the Lucky Strike. We are still waiting on that docking permission. Also, just thought you should know, we are picking up some interesting long-range signatures. Looks like you have got company coming. Big ships, aggressive formation. Estimated arrival in about 40 minutes. The Krillians, Bex gasped. They weren't supposed to arrive until tomorrow. Lucky Strike, Jorik activated his communicator. This is Station Commander Jorik. Permission granted to dock at Bay 7. We may indeed require assistance with the approaching vessels. Outstanding. Captain Santos sounded genuinely excited. We love helping new friends. Fair warning, though, our methods tend to be a bit unconventional. Hope you don't mind if we get creative. Define creative, Jorik said nervously. Oh, you know, the usual. Psychological warfare, tactical misdirection, aggressive problem solving, and if all else fails, we will just ask them very nicely to leave. With emphasis. 20 minutes later, the Lucky Strike had docked, and 3 humans had boarded our station. 3 humans. Standing in our main conference chamber were the first living legends any of us had ever encountered. Captain Santos was exactly what the stories had described, about 2 meters tall, bipedal, with brown skin and dark hair tied back in what I learned was called a ponytail. She wore a jacket covered in patches and symbols that probably told stories we'd never understand. Next to her stood Chief Engineer Marcus Webb, a pale human with intricate designs etched into his exposed arms. The patterns moved slightly as he gestured, and I realized they were functional circuitry tattooed directly onto his skin. The third human introduced herself as Dr. Zara Okafor, their cultural specialist. She had the most unnerving smile I'd ever seen, the kind that suggested she knew secrets about everyone in the room. So Captain Santos said, settling into a chair that was clearly not designed for human anatomy but somehow looked comfortable anyway, 47 species, huh? That's got to make for some interesting dinner conversations. You are really them, Mira whispered. You are actually humans. Last time we checked, Dr. Okafor replied with that unsettling smile. Though after 3 months in hyperspace eating nothing but protein bars and recycled coffee, we might be questioning our own species classification. About these Krillians, Captain Santos continued, what exactly is the nature of your dispute? Jorik cleared his throat. They claim we have been illegally mining asteroids in what they consider their territory. They are demanding compensation and threatening military action if we don't comply. Are you illegally mining asteroids? Engineer Webb asked. Well, technically, the territorial boundaries in that sector are disputed by 6 different species, so the legal definition of illegal is somewhat fluid. So yes, Captain Santos nodded. You are totally mining their rocks. It's more complicated than that. It always is. How many ships are they bringing? I checked our sensors. 12 heavy cruisers, estimated crew of about 8,000 total. The 3 humans exchanged glances. Engineer Webb started laughing. Not the nervous laughter of someone facing impossible odds, but the genuine amusement of someone who'd just heard a particularly good joke. 12 ships, he chuckled. 8,000 Krillians. Emma, you remember the Proxima situation? Oh, this should be fun, Captain Santos grinned. Zara, what do you know about Krillian psychology? Dr. Okafor consulted a device I hadn't seen her pull out. Aggressive, hierarchical, respect strength above all else. They respond well to displays of superior firepower but have a cultural aversion to direct confrontation with obviously superior opponents. Basically, they are bullies who fold when someone bigger shows up. Perfect. Marcus, how long to make our ship look like something that could actually function? Give me 10 minutes and access to your fabrication systems and I will make the Lucky Strike look like the scariest thing this sector has ever seen. Jorik looked confused. But your ship already functions. You made it here. Oh sure, it works fine, Engineer Webb waved dismissively. But it looks like a garbage collector. For this to work, it needs to look like the kind of ship that eats garbage collectors for breakfast and asks for seconds. I don't understand your plan, Beck said. Captain Santos stood up and walked to the main display, where the approaching Krillian fleet was now visible as tiny dots against the starfield. The plan is simple. We are going to convince them that picking a fight with Nexus Station would be the worst mistake they have ever made. How? By introducing them to human diplomacy. 15 minutes later, I was watching the Lucky Strike undock from our station. Except it wasn't the Lucky Strike anymore. Engineer Webb had somehow transformed the ugly, cobbled-together ship into something that looked like it had been designed by nightmares and built by physics-defying engineering. The mismatched hull plating now appeared to be some kind of adaptive armor system. The randomly bolted-on weapons had been repositioned into configurations that suggested this ship could destroy small moons as a warm-up exercise. Most impressively, the entire vessel now seemed to shimmer with an energy field that made it difficult to look at directly. How did you do that so quickly? I asked through the communication channel. Holographic projectors, creative lighting, and a lot of mirrors. Engineer Webb replied cheerfully. Plus, we moved some of our actual weapons systems to more visible positions. Trust me, this baby could take on all 12 of those Krillian ships simultaneously and still have enough firepower left over to redecorate their home planet. Wait, you could actually defeat 12 heavy cruisers? Oh, definitely. But that would be the boring solution. The Krillian fleet had now entered our sensor range properly, and their formation was aggressively military. The 12 massive ships, arranged in a classic intimidation pattern, weapons charged, shields up. Incoming transmission from the Krillian fleet, our communications officer announced. Put it through, Jorik ordered. The main screen filled with the image of a Krillian commander. The species looked like someone had crossed a shark with an angry businessman. All teeth, cold eyes, and expensive uniform. Nexus Station. The commander's voice was everything you'd expect from a military bully. This is Fleet Commander Thak of the Krillian Empire. You will immediately cease all operations in Sector 447 and prepare to transfer compensation for illegal mining activities, or we will be forced to take direct action. Before Jorik could respond, Captain Santos cut into the transmission. Fleet Commander Thak, this is Captain Emma Santos of the Terran vessel Lucky Strike. I represent the interests of Nexus Station in this matter. The Krillian commander's expression shifted from confident aggression to confusion. Terran? I'm not familiar with that species. Most people aren't, until they need to be. We are what you might call problem solvers. This dispute is between the Krillian Empire and Nexus Station. Your involvement is neither required nor welcome. Captain Santos smiled. It was not a reassuring expression. Commander Thak, I appreciate your position, but I'm afraid you are operating under a fundamental misunderstanding of the situation. Which is? You seem to think you are negotiating from a position of strength. Commander Thak's expression hardened. We have 12 heavy cruisers and 8,000 warriors. What exactly do you have that could possibly threaten this fleet? Me, it temus. The single word hung in the void between the two ships. Commander Thak stared at Captain Santos as if she'd just claimed to be able to breathe vacuum. You? Well, me and my crew, and our ship, and our general philosophy regarding people who threaten our friends. One ship against 12? Are you insane? Commander, Dr. Okafor's voice cut in smoothly, before you commit to any particular course of action, you might want to consult your cultural database regarding a species called humans. There was a long pause. I could imagine the Krillian commander frantically ordering his subordinates to run database searches. The pause stretched longer and longer. Finally, Commander Thak's voice returned, much quieter than before. You are them. You are actually them. We are actually us, yes. The stories, they said you were myths. Lots of things are myths until they show up in your neighborhood with questionable fashion choices and an attitude problem. Another long pause. When Commander Thak spoke again, his tone had shifted from aggressive to respectful. Captain Santos, perhaps we could discuss alternative solutions to this territorial dispute. I thought you might see it that way. Here's what we are going to do. You are going to return to Krillian space and formally recognize the mining rights in Sector 447 as belonging to the Nexus Station Collective. In return, they are going to give you a 15% discount on all processed materials from that sector for the next 5 years. That's actually a very reasonable arrangement. We humans are very reasonable people, Commander Thak. Right up until we are not. Understood. We will need to discuss this with our superiors, but I believe this arrangement will be acceptable. Outstanding. Oh, and Commander, spread the word that Nexus Station is under human protection now. We'd hate for there to be any future misunderstandings. The transmission ended. On our sensors, the 12 Krillian heavy cruisers were already beginning to turn away from our station. I stared at the tactical display in disbelief. They are leaving. 12 heavy cruisers with 8,000 warriors, and they are just leaving. Reputation is a powerful weapon, Captain Santos said as her ship returned to dock with our station. Sometimes the scariest thing you can do is be exactly what the scary stories say you are. An hour later, the three humans were back in our conference chamber, sharing what they called coffee with anyone brave enough to try it. The beverage was black, bitter, and somehow managed to be both energizing and terrifying at the same time. "So what happens now?" Jorik asked. "Now," Captain Santos said, "we continue our exploration of this sector, meet new species, make new friends, and occasionally solve problems for people who need help." "Just like that?" "Just like that. Though we should probably establish some kind of communication network. If you are going to be our first official galactic contact, we will need a way to stay in touch." Mira leaned forward eagerly. "Does this mean Earth is going to join the galactic community?" Dr. Okafor and Engineer Webb exchanged glances with Captain Santos. "Earth?" Captain Santos asked. "Oh, we are not from Earth." "Well, not originally." "But you are human." "Yes, but we are what you might call the advanced scouts. Earth won't be ready for galactic contact for at least another 50 years. We are just the humans who got curious early and decided to see what was out here." "How many of you are there?" I asked. "Out here? Maybe a few thousand spread across a dozen ships." "Back home?" Captain Santos shrugged. "Last count was somewhere around 8 billion. The conference chamber fell silent. 8 billion humans. 8 billion creatures from the galaxy's darkest legends, all on one planet, all presumably as resourceful and stubborn as the three sitting in front of us. 8 billion, Jorik repeated quietly. Give or take a few million. Population growth, you know how it is. X's tentacles were doing something I'd never seen before, a kind of nervous spiraling pattern. But Captain Santos, in the stories, in all the legends about your species, there's one thing that every culture agrees on. Every single one. What's that? Meh. That humanity's greatest strength isn't your technology, or your weapons, or even your stubbornness. It's that you never stop trying to make friends, even with your enemies. Captain Santos smiled, and for the first time since they'd arrived, it was a completely warm, genuine expression. "Dr. Okafor, I think our cultural database just got its first update." As I watched the Lucky Strike prepare to leave Nexus Station the next morning, I realized that everything had changed. We weren't alone in the galaxy anymore, not really. Somewhere out there, 8 billion humans were learning about space travel, developing technology, and probably arguing about what to name their first starships. The myths were real. The legends were true. And somehow, against all probability, they wanted to be our friends. The universe, I decided, had a much better sense of humor than I'd ever given it credit for. "Hey, Krix," Captain Santos' voice came over the communication channel one last time. "When we get back to human space, what should we tell them about the galactic community?" I thought about it for a moment, watching their impossible ship drift away from our station. "Tell them we have been waiting for them," I said finally. "And that the coffee here is terrible." The laughter that came back across the void was warm, genuine, and absolutely, completely human. They thought we were just stories until they arrived. Now we knew the truth. The best stories always turn out to be real.